Welcome to the 12th episode of the MMA Podcast. It's a beautiful September 5th, start of the NFL season, but I won't talk about that. I'll talk about what we're covering in the show. We have Ray Thompson, the host of MMAmental on. Really excited to hear MMA from a UK fan's perspective. Of course, we have more with this UFC 151 fallout. Lots of shit being talked about by Dana White and John Jones. Aldo versus Edgar at UFC 153. That's going to be the headliner. Going to be a beautiful fight. Robert, our guest last week, making the news about what he's saying about his student Frank Mir. And we got a ton more to talk about. But before we get to it, let's finish the song.
We did it, mama. We did it. We did it for the love of the game. We did it, mama. We did it. I did it for.
And shout out to Smoke Serpent, the artist of this song. We were lucky enough to have Eddie Bravo on a few episodes back. If you haven't heard that episode, go do it. Really, really fun episode. And a shout out to our partners at MMAmental.com, to Ray and the new host, Patrick, P Money, who is the host over there, along with MMA Playground. Go check them out. We actually don't have any guests this week. Next week, we're going to have Tom Lawler and Misha Tate on. So as you can expect, we're really looking forward to that. Can't wait to talk to Misha and Tom. Tom, one of the funniest characters in the UFC, and I don't need to back up why Misha Tate's going to be an amazing guest.
I'm going to ask Tom why, not why, but how he feels about being in a amateur porn video, which was exposed by Cage Potato.
Ooh, you should probably ask him about that. That would be a good idea. And we're taking calls all show long. We're at 646-378-1046. So call in at any point. It was a kind of random caller. We were talking about 151. The guy's like, why aren't they comparing this to Penn Hughes? I was like, man, I was like 14 when Penn Hughes went down. I don't even know much about Penn Hughes. I was like kind of half agreeing. But definitely call in. I mean, no matter what you want to talk about. If you want to talk about a fight that happened as long ago as Penn Hughes, we'll talk about it. That's just a testament to our callers. We have, some of the most knowledgeable fighters in the sport. So call in at any point, 646-378-1046. If you're listening to a recorded podcast, we air 9 to 11 Eastern, 6 to 8 Pacific every Wednesday night, and we love having live callers who like to participate. You can tweet us at the MMA Podcast. I have eye on our Twitter at all times. So if you tweet at us, I'll definitely read that on the air. And obviously visit our website at the MMA Podcast. So after talking for about 5 minutes straight, what's up, Chris?
Hello, sir.
What's up, pal?
How are you, man?
Oh, my God. I was just screaming. For any live listeners now, you'll probably notice we got started half an hour late. And that's because my beautiful new internet that I got hooked up 3 days ago decided to just get up and quit on me 2 minutes before we went live. I was scrambling. Chris was laughing at me while I got back on Skype, and I'm literally screaming on my laptop, "You motherfucker! Fuck!"
That's not what you said. Own it, dude. That is not what you said.
I mean, what exactly did I say? Because I actually saw red. I thought you motherfucker was a pretty graphic description. It wasn't like I'm trying to be like, oh, and I told that computer to go darn itself.
Yeah, no.
Did I drop a few C-bombs on it?
You said mother cunter at one point, which is a new one. I like that.
I actually don't even remember saying that. I think I literally had a red out, just raged so hard that everything went black.
You had a brown out.
Yes, I've had many brownouts in the past.
Yeah, but either way, you have a right to be mad. I mean,
Chris wishes he had a brownout with Ronda Rousey. That's nor here nor there.
For free, let's not talk about Ronda. We're having Misha on next week, and what if she goes back and listens to our latest episode?
Right, and these motherfuckers are talking about Ronda. Fuck this. And that impression will probably be enough to make her not want to call in. But thanks to Tom and Misha for wanting to come on next week. And, I had a pretty hectic day. Big earthquake in Costa Rica. My thoughts out to everyone there, including my parents who actually live in Costa Rica. I hope everyone there is doing fine. Had a hectic morning. Finally wanted to wake up a little early before work, and that didn't really work out. I woke up 2 minutes before I had to walk out the door. What about you?
Well, today was a slow day at work. It's been raining, so I got rained on my entire bike ride there.
It's raining in Chicago, too. It's so bad walking into work, especially when you're, wearing a button-up, nice shirt. And it isn't white. If it's white, it's nice because you can't really tell every raindrop. I was wearing a blue button-up shirt into work. And when I got off the train, it was light blue. When I walked into work, it was dark blue. It was pouring.
Yeah, it's not enjoyable to have to bike to work. That in itself is annoying and tedious, and you get all hot and tired. But then you add rain to it, and then you had a slow day at work, and it was great.
Yeah. It sounds pretty great. And yeah, we mentioned at the top of the show we were having the host and founder of MMAmental, Ray Thompson, on. So without any further ado, let's throw him on the conversation. We're connecting right now. Skype calling.
Theater of the mind, guys.
Theater of the mind, and we got him on. What's up, Ray?
Hi, you all right?
And, Ray, we mention MMAmental at the top of every show, and I mentioned Ray as a host. But now we actually have him in the flesh, and it is late in the UK. We appreciate it so much. It's 2:37 a.m. in the UK, and Ray is staying up late. He has to be up in 4.5 hours, but he's doing it big to be on the podcast. Thanks a lot, buddy.
Pleasure.
Yeah, and you know, a lot of people in the U.S. think that paying out the ass for a MMA pay-per-view is a normal thing, and that was one of the first things that I actually addressed with him with coming on the podcast. It's kind of night and day as far as U.S. fans and UK fans are treated with the UFC. Those who regularly listen to the podcast know one of my number one sticking points with the UFC. I have a lot of things I love about the UFC. I have a lot of things that I don't love. Probably at the top of the list of things I don't love is the amount they charge. If you wanted to buy every UFC main event pay-per-view last year, you'd have to pay over $1,000. But UK fans are treated a little bit better, if you want to expound on that, Ray.
I'm going to turn everyone against me now. My first time on, and they're all going to hate me once I tell them this. Yeah, I've obviously, being from the UK, I have a lot of interaction with American fans, including yourself, and I've said to a lot of people, and I'll say it to you, I'll say here, we get a much better deal than what you get. I'm on a TV channel called Sky, so I pay my package for Sky. One of the extra channels I can get off Sky is ESPN, which is different to the American one. It's a UK ESPN. And I literally pay £10 a month for that channel for ESPN, which is obviously £120 a year, which is probably around about $200, I'd say, I guess. And for that £10 a month, I get every single UFC event. We don't have pay-per-views over here. So the pay-per-view cards, the Fox cards, the Fuel cards, they're all on ESPN. The only thing we don't get is we don't get any of the prelims on over here. But if you're somebody like myself, you can go online, you can watch it on Facebook, the prelims, or you can watch the prelims on UFC.tv, which is off the UFC website. So we do have access to the prelims, we just don't get them on the TV, but we do get a better deal with the main cards.
That's beautiful. I was actually wondering, we had John Anik on a couple weeks ago who said one of the main things you miss out on the FX cards and the Fuel cards is commercials, wherein Florian and Anik are actually talking the entire time through the commercials, and a lot of times if you see commercials, you'll miss the fighter walk-ins and everything. Do you all get the main pay-per-view cards and the FX cards and the Fox cards broken up with commercials as well?
We do get commercials, but we don't get commercials like you get them in America. We get, again, obviously, you get a lot more adverts over there than what we get. I mean, on the pay-per-view, they'll have little breaks and stuff, but it's not. We don't have long commercials. They're a couple of minutes and then it's back on, and we never miss anything that's important.
Huh, that's pretty interesting. Yeah, it seems like a night and day from the U.S. and U.K. perspective. Do you have any more questions about that before we move on to Ray's podcast, Chris?
Not really, man. I mean, he kind of summed it up beautifully. It's one of those things where just regionally it made sense for the UFC to do that, and I honestly can't be mad that they get that kind of a deal. I mean, ultimately, we talked to Anik about how that, they're not going to move away from the pay-per-views, but what they will do is lessen the pay-per-views. We'll have more free stuff, and that's a good thing for the fans. So it's nice for the UK guys, and eventually it'll catch up to us.
Definitely, yeah. I wanted to know, too, you've been to a couple live events as well, right, Ray?
Absolutely, yeah. Every chance I get, I'll go to a live event. I've been to about 10 or 11 live UFC events, and I'm going to the one in 3 weeks in Nottingham.
Oh, wow. So what is the most recent UFC event you've been to?
Sweden. I went to watch it in Sweden when Gustafsson fought Thiago Silva in the main event, which was a Fuel TV card.
Nice. Was Jay Jeans there as well, our friend Jay from the MMA Podcast?
He was there, and what made that event even better was I ended up booking into the same hotel as all the UFC fighters.
Wow.
Awesome, man.
It was. Picture this. I'm coming downstairs, I'm coming down in the lift, sorry. The lift door opens, Georges St. Pierre's there.
Oh, my gosh.
Oh.
That happened to me.
Chris, could we get an impression of Georges St. Pierre bumping into Ray on the elevator?
Sure, no problem. Ding, ding. Are you going up or are you going down?
Yeah, so wow, that's pretty crazy, and it's even more awesome you were going to UFC on Fuel, Struve versus Miocic in Nottingham. What is the fight you're most pumped for on that card?
Oh God, that card is such a fantastic card. If I had to pick one fight, I'd go Paul Sass and Matt Wyman.
Yeah, I was actually talking to Chris. We were talking about we do a segment every week, and I won't give up who has who, but one of us actually picked Sass versus Wyman for one of the top 3 fights we're pumped for this month. Sass is an animal off his back, and really, it's going to be a test. Wyman's a legit wrestler, but I have a feeling Sass is going to find a way to work off his back and cinch up that triangle. We actually had Eddie Bravo on, which I mentioned earlier, a few weeks ago, and Sass is one of his favorite fighters. He's really probably the most exciting up-and-coming fighter coming out of England.
Yeah, he is. And I liken this. I'll talk about this fight on our show as well. And for me, because obviously Paul Sass has just fought and beat Jacob Volkman. Now, for me, Volkman is a better wrestler than Matt Wyman, but Matt Wyman is a better all-round fighter. So it's going to be a very interesting fight because, Paul Sass off his back is devastating.
That's so true, man. Like, what Jake just brought up, Eddie brought it up not only to us, but on the Joe Rogan Experience. Paul Sass is the kind of guy that if you go down into his guard, you are playing with fire. Like most guys, they might have a couple tricks, but it's almost, I want to say, a 90% chance that if you fall into his guard, you're going to get tapped out.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I would judge Sass's last fight against Jacob Volkman. Jacob Volkman is a legitimate fighter. Before his fight against Paul Sass, had 4 impressive wins, even though they all were by decision. He beat Paul Tellez Kelly, Antonio McKee, Danny Lascall Castillo, and Efrain Escudero. And with the exception of the McKee fight, won all those fights pretty handily. Sass finished Volkman in the first round by, guess what, triangle. Like, it was absolutely beautiful. And if Sass is able to defeat Wyman by submission, I think he probably is legitimately the best Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu artist at lightweight, even including those like Nate Diaz, because you don't just cinch up a guy like Wyman or Volkman while being a black belt. You have to be an expert black belt to do that, and Sass has some nasty stuff. Hasn't lost yet in his career.
No, he's set up as well for that the transition with his legs for the Volkman triangle, because it looked like he was going to go with one way, and then he switched to do that. It was just amazing, and his legs are just so long. They just can't. Mm-hmm. They know what's coming, but they can't stop it.
Set up that triangle armbar like a boss. Yep, the Sass angle. I'm actually built the exact opposite. I have tiny little like I'm 6 feet tall, but I have like these giant gorilla arms. I'm 6 feet tall. I have a reach of 6'4". But my legs are, I have a little 28-inch inseam. I have little baby legs. So I would probably be the exact opposite kind of fighter as Sass. Sass has those long legs and can just cinch up anything, kind of like we saw Silva do against Sonnen in their first stanza. It seems like you're in trouble, but oh wait, and now it's cinched up, you're done.
It would be impossible for Husmar Palhares to leg lock you.
Yes, so Ray, I wanted to talk to you about our podcast as well. I'm sure a lot of you have listened to MMAmental, starting to take a little bit of following like we have. And honestly, we've talked about it before. It's kind of hard to believe. We've started from really humble beginnings, but we've had some really impressive guests on. It was such a pleasure having people like Drysdale, Anik, Bravo on. Who is your favorite guest in all of the MMAmental episodes so far?
I think the biggest name I've had, or the name that got me the most, was probably Renzo Gracie. I never imagined I'd get to speak to a Gracie on my podcast.
Right. That's insane, yeah. But as far as the interviews went, who was probably the funnest person you've talked to as far as joking around?
Do you know what? It's mad because I feel like we've been quite lucky with our interviews, and we've had some really, really good interviews, and I think most of our interviews have gone well. I'd say there's probably only one that I've come away and I've just felt it was uncomfortable with one guest, and the other ones have all gone well. Who's been the best one? I mean, we spoke to Pete Spratt today. He was brilliant, talking about his past fight. Dean Thomas was a great guest. He was so nice to speak with him.
Yeah, definitely hop on iTunes and check out that Pete Spratt episode. But I actually kind of want to hear a little bit of that uncomfortable interview. We had one that was half uncomfortable, half hilarious, which I think Chris knows exactly who I'm talking about.
Goddamn Hominick.
Mark Hominick. That was a really interesting interview. But you tell us about your semi-uncomfortable interview, and we'll tell you about that Hominick interview.
We spoke to Mark a couple of weeks ago, and he was all right. He was really nice.
That was probably because you didn't wake up his wife and baby.
Okay. Well, my interview was. I'll talk a little bit about why it was awkward, and then I'll say who it was. It was awkward because when we get them on, I want to. I've been following the sport for a long, long time, and I've got an insane memory for fights from years ago, and I want to hear their views on these fights. I want to hear what they think of their career, what's their standout moments, things like that. And we had this guy on. He didn't want to talk about his current promotion because they're his employees. He didn't want to talk about his best fights because he's had too many. And it was just like every time I asked him a question, he avoided answering it. He wasn't funny or rude or anything like that. And also, his sense of humour was so different to what our sense of humour was, and there was no connection, and it just felt awkward and uncomfortable.
Really?
Yeah. And it was actually it's a current UFC fighter, and I'll give you a few clues. You probably guess it. It's a current UFC fighter. He's a heavyweight. He's a heavyweight fighter. He's not from the States, but he's from an English-speaking country, and he's not from the UK, obviously. He made his name big in Japan.
Was it Miocic?
No, and it's not just for MMA. He's known for another combat sport as well. Was
it Alistair Overeem?
No, it was. You're in the right front though. You're thinking K1, which is good.
I know it. I actually think I listened. Siler?
No, Siler was really good. It's a heavyweight.
Hold on. Give me one more clue, dude.
Okay. Right, he's from the side of the world which would describe as being down under.
Aussie heavyweight.
Okay, an Aussie heavyweight. Mark Hunt.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah. And I spoke to Jake, and he spoke to Mark, and he said he was great for him. So obviously, him and Josh. So Josh and Mark
was about to say, I don't know if I've ever talked to this guy.
No, it was Josh. Sorry, Josh said. So Josh and him must have just hit it off, but we obviously just didn't, and there was just no connection. Normally, you just get something from the fighter, but there was just nothing there.
Really?
Well, if you look at his post-fight interviews, he's the same way with Rogan. Rogan's like, so, how do you feel about this? I knocked him out.
It was good. It wasn't bad. It was good. I always kind of think twice about people who always mix it up with random people on a Twitter. Even me, I'm nowhere close to being a celebrity. I'm probably closer to homeless on the spectrum than I am celebrity. But even I won't mix it up with random people on Twitter. People like Mark Hunt and Dana White, they're always mixing it up with people on Twitter. And part of me always sort of questions, what is your motive of just going hardcore on these random Twitter people? But that's pretty interesting. Yeah, our story with Hominick, it was a pretty unfortunate situation. It was, I'll admit, it was mostly my fault, but we were going to call up Hominick. He gave me a number to call, and we're calling it from the studio. Actually, if you listen to the Mark Hominick episode, you'll hear it. Ring, 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 nothing. Ring, ring, nothing. And I'm like, all right, I guess Hominick isn't home. And then I pop open my Twitter to see if he's tweeted at me or anything. I have 5 direct messages. I'm like, oh no, what's happened? One from about 10 minutes back. Hey, it's Mark. Just seeing if you could call my cell phone instead of my home.
Oh,
yep,
nice.
here's the number you should call instead. Please don't call this number. My wife is trying to sleep. Please stop calling the number. Please call myself. I'm just like, oh no, oh God. And to make matters worse, so we'd blown up his home, which it's probably the latest MMA podcast we've done. I think it was 10 o'clock Eastern, which is where I was at the time and Mark was. So we're blowing up his house phone at 10 p.m. And then we're like, all right, we don't have him apparently. And then we start talking about poop. Literally, we start talking about poop. Chris talks about a huge BM he had at work. I share stories with a similar BM, and then Mark calls in, which he's like, hey, I'm actually down the street at a buddy's. We've been listening this whole time. So not only have we woken up Hominick's whole family, woken up his wife, woken up his baby, but he and his friends had, which is one thing to talk about poop to total strangers. I don't give a shit, I'll bump in, I've worked at this new job in Chicago for less than 2 weeks, and literally yesterday I went into my boss's office and I was like, dude, I just took the weirdest poop. It was super green, but it's a totally different thing when a celebrity is listening to you talk about poop. Yeah, it was pretty embarrassing hearing Hominick be like, yeah, you woke up my wife and baby, and I'd be like, yep, and we've been listening to talk about poop for the last 5 minutes.
So what was he like when he came on the show then?
He actually came on, and we joke around, but he was more than friendly, was super nice. Actually, up until the point where Chris fucked up a Great Lake, and I'll let you take over from there, Chris. You can't fuck up a Great Lake around a Canadian, son. Sorry.
I just told him that we used to have a family, retreat in Canada on a Great Lake, and I couldn't tell him which one it was. And after that, he was a little agitated with me, not to the point of being a dick, but you could tell he was like, come on, man. And then I told him that I live with my mom. Now, I do live with my mom, but I pay half the rent, half the bills. It's like a 50-50 thing. So he interrupts me and says, "Oh, in the basement?" And then that was a running gag for the entire thing.
And you played along with it like a champ, and you were talking about having Alistair Overeem posters hung up in your mom's basement.
And a cat farm and a hot dog grill.
You do have a hot dog grill, though.
I do. It is incredible. Ray, speaking of hot dogs, I wanted to ask you about British food.
Okay.
All I know about British food is bangers and mash. Can you expand upon that? Because a lot of people think that, it's some plain food, but for my, humble opinion, I know that you guys have a lot of Indian foods over there. How's the food out there? Because I am a food nut. I like to eat.
Yeah. It depends food's good. Food's good out here. What kind of food do you like to eat? Because we literally have a bit of everything. Obviously, bangers and mash is obviously sausage and mash. But yeah, we have Indian, Chinese. We have all sorts.
Well, as far as British food goes, what's your favorite British dish?
Okay, you've got the traditionals like your fish and chips, or you've got your roast dinners. So you've got your meat and your vegetables and your potato and your gravy. That's another popular one over. That tends to be we call it like a Sunday dinner, and then that can either be roast lamb, roast beef, turkey, pork. So they're probably the more traditional English dishes.
Okay.
But we've got a lot of dishes that we take from other cultures. Like we've got pizza and lasagna, and obviously that comes from Italian culture. So we've got all sorts from different places. But one thing probably different over here to over where you are, I've only been to the States once, but our portions aren't as big as what they are in the States.
Yeah, I've heard that a lot. Like, we just lump up a bunch of crap and don't put as much time or care into it.
I'll order a cheeseburger from a random restaurant, and literally I'm just expecting, a normal-sized cheeseburger, a little bit of fries. I will get literally 10 gallons of French fries and a cheeseburger that probably weighs 17 pounds. It's sort of insane.
So back to MMA, Ray. Enough about our disgusting eating habits. I wanted to ask you kind of a two-part question. Number one, Michael Bisping has been, on the record, he said that British people don't really have wrestling. There is wrestling, but it's not as big of a thing out there in the UK. And I just kind of wanted to ask you why, because you're an MMA nut just like me.
Yeah.
Why is wrestling not such a big deal in the UK?
Do you know what? It is interesting because I was speaking to Patrick earlier on, my co-host. And you know what? It's not just wrestling. It's
Did we lose Ray there? Are you there, Chris? Hello? Alright, I really don't know what happened there. I'm literally now connecting. From now on, I'm going to connect with my landlord's internet, because apparently this janky-ass Chicago internet isn't doing the trick. I'm really sorry, Chris and Ray. Sorry to all our audience. I think Blog Talk Radio should end right where it cut off and start where it picked up. This is maddening, to say the least. But I think, Chris, when it cut off, you were just talking about you had had just asked Ray about British wrestling, and Ray, you had talked about a question that Patrick posed. If you want to take off from there, I believe that's where my internet cut out. And trust me, over the weekend, I'm going to march down to Comcast Chicago. Oh, by the way, if you're in the Chicago area, don't get Comcast. I've had Comcast for 3 days, and my internet's probably cut off maybe 15 times. It sucks ass. So don't get Comcast yet again. But go ahead, Ray, after I finish my anti-Comcast rant.
Right, I was just saying, I was speaking to Patrick earlier on, and I was saying it's not just wrestling, it's sports in general. You've got such a big sports culture over in America, which is brilliant, whether it be in, your football, your basketball, and it's all obviously comes from high school, then college and university. We don't have the same culture over here, and we certainly don't have wrestling over here like you have wrestling over there. I mean, you've got kids wrestling at school, like at 10 and 11 years old, getting into wrestling, and that holds you obviously in good stead. We don't do anything like that in this country, unfortunately. And with MMA getting more and more popular, as it is everywhere, including the UK, wrestling is one of the best bases to have for MMA, whether it's to keep the fight standing or to take the fight down. And hopefully, eventually, they'll introduce it over here, but it's not looking likely at the minute.
And let me ask you something, Ray. Like, I know this is a cliche question, but I just want to get your insight because you're the only, British person I've ever talked to that knows MMA. How impressed are you with Michael Bisping? I know he's the biggest name out there. I have really just had a chip on my shoulder about the guy for years. I just didn't like him. When he got knocked out by Henderson, I was just amazed. But then he came back, and you see this evolution where he ends up fighting, finishing a bunch of people, and he fights Chael Sonnen and fights most of the takedowns and gets up and arguably won the fight. You have to have a lot of admiration for that guy. He's put the work in, especially for someone who hasn't wrestled like Chael has for his entire life.
I'm a big fan of Michael Bisping. I've always been a big fan of Michael Bisping. I remember seeing Michael Bisping fight at a local event I'm from Coventry, in my local town, Coventry, and he actually announced at the event that he was going to be going on The Ultimate Fighter Season 3, and he actually had a big reputation on the UK scene anyway. And do you remember on the Ultimate Fighter Season 3, it was him and there was another UK guy called Ross Pearson.
Yes, of course.
Yeah, and they obviously fought in the house, and they actually talked, said, oh yeah, we've had a fight on the UK circuit. Well, that was actually in my hometown, and I saw that fight live on the UK circuit. So I knew of him before he went into the Tough House, but I've always liked him, and I know he does get a lot of stick because of a character he portrays, and I know he's not very popular in America, and I can understand why people don't like him because of the way he comes across. But I always think he's been very underrated. And if you look at, you talked about the Chael Sonnen fight. The only time he's ever had a fight where he's looked out of place was against Dan Henderson. You look at him at 205, he fought Rashad Evans and lost a very, very close decision to Rashad Evans. And obviously Rashad Evans is one of the best in the world at 205. And Rashad Evans wasn't able to take Bisping down and control him. Bisping has always been good at getting back to his feet. And I'm sure against Sonnen, he even tried to take Sonnen down as well. His wrestling is very, very good and very underrated. I
actually had Bisping winning that Sonnen fight. It's funny. I had Diaz beating Condit and Bisping beating Sonnen. But I thought about it, and I was like, you know what? I guess I'd rather have both of those fights go the opposite way than the way I called them, because, everyone wanted to see Silva-Sonnen too. But, I had Bisping winning both the Sonnen fight and the Wanderlei Silva fight. Even though it was unanimous for Wanderlei Silva, I think that submission attempt really kind of put it in Wanderlei's court, which I can see, but you can't really give a guy too much credit for a submission attempt if he doesn't finish it. I'm a big believer in Michael Bisping, and this is going to be an outright war between him and Brian Stann. Brian Stann's a favorite, which I'm obviously a big fan of Brian Stann. I say obviously because it's hard not to be a fan of Brian Stann's. It seems like a really, really personable guy, and it's hard to hate against a guy no matter what country he is from if he's a war hero. Stan really hasn't stacked up that well against top opponents. He beat, guys like Chris Lieben, but other than that, his big opponents have been guys like Chael Sonnen, Phil Davis, Krzysztof Soshinsky, and he lost all his fights. So I will be rooting for Stan because I'm a true American, and also, but I think Bisping should be the favorite in that fight, which he isn't.
Yeah, I'm surprised. I think Bisping should be favourite as well. I think it's that fight is a prime example of power versus pace, because Stan, his power is amazing, but Bisping's going to be in and out. He's going to have the foot movement. He's going to be landing the shots, getting back out again, and that's what it's going to be for me: power versus speed.
I think that Bisping is actually going to finish Stan. I don't know if you know this, Ray, but back in 2011, UFC 136, I made a bet with the host of a podcast called Joe Show Radio. It's based out here in America, and I said Brian Stan will win by triangle choke in the last 2 minutes of the second round, and then cut to Chael Sonnen choking him out. I think that Bisping is going to finish Brian Stan. He's going to wear him out, probably a late second round, early third round TKO.
I also think if the fight goes to the ground, Bisping's going to have a big advantage on the ground as well, because Bisping's ground game is very underrated.
Yeah, and I really think if Bisping is able to get over Stan, he might warrant a fight. I don't think he warrants a fight with Anderson Silva yet, mainly because he's coming off against that loss against Sonnen, and would just be on a one-fight win streak. But if he beats Stan, I think he's warranted a fight against a guy like Weidman. And, I feel like that fight really could happen, especially if GSP gets through Condit and Silva and GSP are matched up, and there's a little bit more time for those middleweights to fight each other. I think Bisping-Weidman would be a really, really intriguing matchup, and it would be another fight where Bisping would probably be the underdog, but as far as experience goes, I don't know if Bisping would realistically be that much an underdog against a guy like Chris Weidman.
I think Chris Weidman's a beast. I think he's the future of the division. I've said before as well, I've said it on my show and I'll say it here, I think he's going to be the next champion, I do. I think he reminds me of a middleweight version, a white version of John Jones. He's long, he's rangy, he's great striking, he's great at the grappling, his jiu-jitsu's great. I think if he fights Silva or beats Silva, I think he's going to be the next middleweight champion. And
he's got a big head. You can't downplay that. He has a giant head.
Speaking of John Jones, that's actually our first talking point of the evening. What did you take about this whole UFC 151 fiasco with Jones and Dan Henderson?
It's just such a shame, isn't it? It was such a shame, and it was. I felt sorry for the guys on the undercard. We spoke to Darren Cruikshank last week. He said he's trained for a fight, he's paid to get ready for this fight, and then he's not fighting out till December. So he's going to have to go through a whole training camp again. So obviously his fitness, he's not going to have the same fitness now between now and December if he stops training. So he's going to go through it all again. It's going to cost him more money. And I feel sorry for guys like that. There's guys on the undercard that have not, they haven't got the luxury of having the excess money that someone like Jones has because he's more established. Mm-hmm. And it's people like that I feel sorry for, because it's not just the wages they they lose, it's all their sponsorship money they lose as well. And, they've got bills to pay, they've got their mortgage, they've got families to feed, and that's who I felt sorry for personally. Right,
and Dana White actually came out last night on UFC Tonight saying, the fighters were compensated, don't worry, the fighters were compensated. I usually believe most of the things Dana White says. Dana White seems like a kind of no-nonsense person, but it makes me wonder, all right, if he really compensated the fighters, would people like Charlie Brenneman and Darren Cruikshank, both people we've had on this podcast and seem like really honest people, would both of them really be coming out against the UFC if they really were compensated? Or is the UFC just trying to cover their ass? Which is the more likely story? And as much as I want to buy what Dana White says, I love Dana White. I was really looking forward to the interview. Some of the things he said, I really didn't buy.
The UFC has always been good at looking after its fighters. You've obviously spoken to people, we've spoken to people, and one of the things you always say is, from other organisations to the UFC, if the UFC does look after its fighters, when we spoke to Darren last week, he hadn't been compensated yet, but he did say he expects to be. He'd be surprised if he wasn't, because he said, the UFC have always looked after. They do look after their guys, and that, they are known for that. To be fair.
All right, cool. Yeah, I actually mentioned to you I hadn't heard the last few MMA mentals because I've been working my tail off. I just moved to Chicago with a new job. But, I had heard Crookshanks had said things and Brenneman said things. But you saying that, I really hope that the UFC had looked after him by now, because they've really got a history of doing that, with the whole health insurance thing, this, that, and the other. I'm glad to hear Crookshank left that open. Crookshank was one of our favorite interviews. He was a funny guy talking about the zombie apocalypse, all sorts of stuff.
Yeah,
dude, he's active on Twitter. I mean, he posted a link on Twitter saying he was going for a 1 o'clock in the morning cardio bike ride. And I posted a link, a reply to that saying, hey, first rule in Zombieland is cardio. And then I wake up the next morning, open up my Twitter, and I have a reply from him saying, hey, look at these zombies over here taking a zombie nap. And he posts a picture of him smiling on his bike with his helmet with 2 bums passed out in the street.
That's amazing. Yeah, we're really want to have Crookshank on again. He was one of the standout guys. He, Hominick, Lieben was one of the funniest people we had on ever, talking about the crazy stories of him and his uncle. I'll say it every single podcast. It's wild that this sport is known for quote unquote human cockfighting when the fighters themselves are probably some of the most personable, intelligent people you've ever met.
Yeah, we spoke to Chris Lieben as well. He's brilliant, great guest.
He really is.
Yeah, he's such a nice guy, he's funny, isn't he?
Yeah. So to touch on one more news topic, I feel really bad about keeping you up so late. To our listeners, if you want any sign of dedication, listen to MMA Mental, because Ray is on. It is 3:13 a.m. right now in the UK, and Ray has to work tomorrow. That is just dedication to podcasting, dedication to sport, and
I've got the school run as well.
And we really couldn't. Yeah, we really couldn't thank you enough.
No, I appreciate you letting me come on the show. I really do.
Oh no, dude, anytime, really. I would come on to MMA Mental via Roundtable, something I wanted to do for a while, but it kind of works out the opposite way. Yeah, it comes on around 3 my time when I'm still working. I'll probably work out something. I literally may, I've got a X amount of sick days and personal days every year. I literally might take one just to be on the roundtable because it's something I really want to do. But unfortunately, I'm usually working until about 11 o'clock UK time, 5 o'clock Chicago time. But one more news topic that I wanted to touch on, which Chris and I will touch on later in the podcast, but I wanted to hear your opinion about. This week it was announced UFC 153, Jose Aldo versus Frank Edgar. Do you think Frank Edgar, it was made a big deal. Most people didn't think Chael Sonnen warranted a light heavyweight title fight after a loss, just switching weight classes and getting a title shot. Do you think Frankie Edgar deserves an immediate title shot at featherweight, which it's kind of funny because Dana White has said in the past that Frank Edgar won't get an immediate title shot, which he is. And B, how do you see this fight going? I cannot wait to see UFC 153 Aldo versus Edgar.
I think Edgar and Sonnen is a different scenario because Edgar's dropping down the weight where Sonnen was going up a weight.
That's a good point.
Also, Edgar's taking the fight on short notice, so he's obviously doing a favour because, originally the opponent was Eric Koch, who, we spoke to him a few weeks ago, so I was disappointed to see that he had to pull out. Obviously, he's had an injury, but I haven't seen what the injury is yet. But yeah, so I was disappointed for him. I think Frankie Edgar deserves it. Yeah, I do. I think he was a brilliant lightweight. You've just got to look at his fights with Maynard, what he did with BJ Penn. even the fights with Henderson, he lost them both, but they were both razor thin. It wasn't like he was completely dominated. I mean, some people feel, especially that second fight, that Edgar won. So, yeah, I think Edgar definitely warrants a title shot. I think he's good enough to get a title shot. I don't know how the fight's going to go because Edgar is awesome, but Aldo is awesome as well. And, you know, as Edgar lost the speed advantage dropping down, Aldo's leg kicks are devastating. To be fair, if I had to pick, which obviously I will be picking, I'll be picking Aldo to win. I think Aldo's one of those guys you can't pick against.
That's
Aldo
really
has
true.
that punching power, man. That's the difference. Like you said, Frankie dropping down, speed will be nearly the same. Aldo will have the kickboxing. Frankie will have the boxing advantage. But I think the power is the one difference, and I think that's going to show up. And like Jake has said on previous episodes, Frankie somehow every fight gets the craziest bloody nose and gets bruised up pretty easily.
I don't know if he'll be able to take those kind of shots and those kind of punishments from Jose Aldo.
That's a great point. You know, the way I see it, my top 3 pure strikers in the UFC, I have Anderson Silva, Jose Aldo, John Jones. And if you're a better striker than John Jones, you're throwing some heat. And Jose Aldo, I mean, I'm really a lot more excited for this fight than I am Aldo Coke, because even though Coke is 13-1, has a really impressive record, honestly, you know, his best win is against Rafael Assunção and Jonathan Brookins. I don't really feel like he's matched up against the top of featherweights. And obviously, you know, Edgar's coach has even said, you know, gone as far to say he's a natural bantamweight. You know, he literally cuts no weight. He weighs like 157, 158 on vacation. He apparently went to Disney World with his family for a week, came back and weighed 157. A guy who really should be fighting at 135 or 145. It's going to be such a great fight, and it's one of these fights almost like a Silva Sonnen. You have one of the best strikers in the game versus one of the most iron chins in the game. I feel like I probably could take a sledgehammer, hit Frankie Edgar in the face, full blast with a sledgehammer, get that one free shot. Frankie Edgar could still probably beat my ass after that shot. He has just such an iron chin, such a great resolve. I feel like that even more than the Vera Shogun fight, which was such a bloodbath and such a war. I feel like that's really going to be an awesome match.
It's for me as well. It's a super fight. You've got two guys that are ranked top 10 pound for pound. You know, this is the equivalent of getting Silva versus GSP. This is two guys that have dominated different weight classes, and now they're going to meet. It is for me. It's a super fight. Definitely.
It is really a super fight. I would probably put Aldo Edgar up in the ranks of a, you know, that's probably the lightweight version of a Silva GSP, of a Jones Junior Dos Santos. I freaked the fuck out when I heard about Aldo versus Edgar being matched up with one another, and I was surprised it didn't receive such a crazy outroar of support and excitement in the MMA community. But I really cannot wait for that. Yeah, I mean, we don't want to keep you up too long, Ray. It has been awesome having you on MMAmental.com, and we actually weren't planning on it at first, because usually we only ask, you know, people like UFC fighters, along with Eddie Bravo and John Anik, this is a question. But you've been such an amazing guest, we figure we may as well ask you too, because you are truly the MMApodcast.com royalty at this point. It's a really serious question. We ask all the UFC fighters we have on, pretty much every serious guest we have on, and I guess we'll ask you too. I'll let you take it away, Chris, for the super serious question.
All right, Ray, are you sitting down? Are you in the seated position?
I'm worried.
Okay, so Ray, you have a voice of velvet, right?
You
nice
really
voice.
do have a velvety voice.
I could listen to that all day. Great accent. But
do you want me to talk dirty for you?
I was actually wondering if you could record.
Do you want me to park my car in your garage?
Certain penthouse stories and just like record on a tape and send it to me.
Do you want me to get some of Dancing Doll stories for you?
Oh my God! If you read one of Dancing Doll stories, I would probably. It would take way too long to clean up the mess afterwards.
I'm gonna walk into my kitchen tomorrow when my mom's sitting there on the laptop, and I'm just gonna go dancing dolls. And then some Oedipal shit is gonna go down. I don't like that, but anyways. So I said he had a velvety voice, and velvet definitely lends a quality of ice cream. We ask all the fighters at the very end, what is Ray Thompson's favorite ice cream?
Strawberry cheesecake.
Oh, what a classy choice for a classy man. That is actually probably the classiest ice cream we've had chosen. Probably, we had Lieben on, who said he had a more ghetto taste and like cotton candy.
Exactly. It was bubblegum ice cream for
bubblegum. Bubblegum. Probably the most memorable was John Anik saying, "Oh, I'm lactose intolerant. I can't eat ice cream."
That was memorable for me. I felt like a dick.
And then on top of that, he not only said, "I can't eat ice cream," he said, "Yeah, and my family used to take trips to the Dairy Queen, and they'd all get ice cream, and I'd order a hot dog."
So you made him cry, basically.
Oh, you poor bastard.
I wanted to call John Anik Little Rogan until I heard that, and then I just scrapped that completely. I was like, no, I'm not going to do it.
Oh, no, but Ray, we would literally have you on the entire 2 hours if we could, but that would be cruel, because at this point, it's literally 3:23 a.m., You have things to do tomorrow. You're on top of being a working man. You're a father too, so we don't want to keep you on too late. But seriously, if you have listened to this, I don't need to give you a reason to listen to MMA Mental with Ray. Awesome host, MMAmental.com. Follow him on MMA Mental on Twitter. You have any other shout-outs, Ray?
Next week's guest, we've got lined up one so far. We've got the Fight Professor on next week, Stephen Quadros, so we're excited about that.
Stephen Quadros, are you serious? That's awesome.
Yeah. Well, we're excited. We're excited.
Badass. Stephen Quadros, yeah. I mean, he and Rutan, I mean, maybe the best fight tandem, the fight commentating tandem in the history of MMA.
I don't know about that. I like
he's added me on Skype as well, so it's quite good. So I'm quite pleased. But yeah, I want to say as well to you two, I really do appreciate you having me on. And Jake, you helped me out as well with the videos, so I really appreciate that as well. I will try to say that.
Definitely, dude. It was just, something. I want to help you. Obviously, you and Agati your way to help us. We didn't have a guest this week, but you were honestly just as compelling, if not more compelling, than anyone we could have had on the podcast. It's really interesting hearing the side of a UK fan, and dude, I know it's late, but anytime in the future, we would love to have you back on.
Yeah, you just give me a shout, and I'll come back on any time, mate. Thank you very much. I will. You won't be able to get rid of me now. You enjoy the rest of your show. Definitely. Thanks a lot, Ray. We'll right, and either of us would love to come on MMA Mental at any time. MMAmental.com. If you haven't logged on to that site, you're missing out. It's a fucking dope website. Check it out. Thanks a lot, Ray. Cool. Cheers. Bye. Take it easy, man. Bye. Ray Thompson. What a beautiful bitch. Ray is the host of MMAmental.com. I've said it about 100,000 times now. If you are not literally, right now, you the listener, that's right, you, if you're not on MMA Mental, if you're not on MMAmental.com right now, I'm going to travel through your headphones. I'm going to crawl out like Alien, off of Alien, like the end of Alien 1, right? Is that the one where the alien busts out of the lady's chest, or is that Alien 2? I think that's Alien 2.
I don't know, but
anyway, I'm going to bust out of your chest, and I'm going to do horrible things, go to MMAmental.com right now. That was an amazing,
Our
amazing
Jake
interview.
Walters will ear rape you, but
I will rape you.
To be quite honest, man, not only
let's go in the FBI data bank.
Not only a class act, but he's super knowledgeable, and his voice. I was sitting there just like with my eyes closed, and I had my hands on the keyboard, and I was just like, it's so good.
I had my hands on my penis. I was masturbating when he talked.
We have Misha Tate on next week. Stop it.
I will have my hands busy next week too. Anyway, that was a awesome interview. Thanks a lot, Ray. And honestly, above all else, it is fucking 3:26 a.m. right now in the UK. Personally, I try and go to bed at like 10 or 11. It was like 12:30 a.m. UK time when I hit Ray up. I was like, hey, long shot, but you want to come on the podcast at 2? And he's like, sure, man, wouldn't be a problem. Ray's awesome guy, very knowledgeable. For the fucking 4,000th time, check out MMAmental.com, or I will legitimately rape you like Todd Aiken. Anyway, he passed the threats of rape. We pulled on Ray at the beginning of the podcast. Do you have any interesting anecdotes from your time at the movie theater, Chris?
Anecdotes. We haven't talked to John Anik for like 2 or 3 weeks.
Oh, if we could have John Anik on and have a feature called Anecdotes, and John Anik talks about certain things, we call this week on Anecdotes, which I doubt we could because John Anik, he does UFC Tonight and does certain UFC cards. I'm sure UFC Tonight pays him an exorbitant amount of money. We'd probably need to pay him at least $10,000 to get a regular spot. But if we could have a segment called Anecdotes, that would probably make
You're welcome.
Anecdotes. Oh, my God. We have to have John Anik on again just so we can have a segment called Anecdotes.
And we'll just talk to him about how he has a tiny head and looks like a miniature Joe Rogan.
Whoa, that would be horrible. He would probably hang up immediately or cuss us out like Bobby Valentine.
I don't know who that is.
You don't know who that is. John Anik knows who that is because he's a Red Sox fan. Anyway, we got a lot to talk about on this week's podcast. Still a lot of fallout from UFC 151. John Jones coming out saying just a lot of ridiculous stuff. And kind of Dana White doing the same. Dana White went on UFC Tonight, which I was kind of disappointed. UFC Tonight pumped it up and said Dana White would be saying a lot of ridiculous stuff. He kind of said what we expected him to say. He said, oh yeah, John Jones and I are fine. John Jones definitely takes most of the blame, but Dan Henderson should have told me earlier. Machida will have to fight again before a title shot, which we know all of these things, because it was guaranteed that Dan Henderson would get a title shot after Vitor Belfort, which puts a potential Lyoto Machida title shot at least a year down the line. Lyoto Machida isn't injured. Of course he's going to fight again. John Jones saying ridiculous stuff. Saying he considered paying other fighters' salary until they insulted him. We'll discuss that in a minute. While Chris takes a pee, as he told me he was going to. We also have the Ultimate Fighter premiere September 16th. That's going to be this next Sunday night. That's definitely going to be interesting. Aldo Edgar, we're going to break that down. We had Robert Drysdale on last week, who actually made news talking about his student Frank Mir. We got a solid 10 seconds of sports, stuff about Mayhem Miller, Anderson Silva, Freddie Roach, ONE FC. That Andre Arlovsky Tim Sylvia fight was pretty interesting. And you know what? While Chris is gone, I might actually run our 10 seconds of sports, even though I feel like he's back. Chris, are you back? He is not back, and I'm just talking to myself. So, because of that, let's get it going right now. Let's do 10 seconds of sports.
Woo!
Woo! The NFL season starts tonight as the Giants take on the Cowboys. That game is going on right now. Last time I checked, it's 0-0. Oh, my God, it's 14-10 now, Dallas in the third quarter. I love football. Thank God it's back. Thank God Florida sucks. And that wasn't all football, 10-second sports, because football is back, bitches. Knock that out of the way. Yeah, you want to talk a little bit more about this UFC 151 fallout? We had a lot of quotes from Dana White, from John Jones. What do you think about Dana White coming out and saying that, oh yeah, Henderson probably should have told me a couple weeks before, and then the card wouldn't have had to have been canceled. I feel like it kind of goes in the category of too little too late.
You talking to me?
Are you talking to me? No, I'm talking to my fucking ass. Who the fuck you think I'm talking about? Hey!
Oh, big fucking ass.
Big fat fucking ass.
Now, as far as, all the blame shifting around, it falls on everyone involved. I blame John Jones the most, but if I had to say a close second, it's Machida, Shogun, and Dana White. I mean, they've, for the last, 10 years, a decade, they've never canceled a show. So there were some kind of weird circumstances that happened here where they decided that, they had spent too much money promoting it and it was a last-minute switch. They probably could have actually, swung with Machida or Shogun. They both turned it down, and I think they just realized that this is their last shot, at the 205 strap. So
you're getting a lot of static there, Chris. I don't know what's...
Hello?
You're good.
Okay.
Were you in a wind tunnel there? Were you caught in the path of an F4 tornado?
No, I was perfectly fine.
Or an F3, maybe, an F2
I was
even?
sitting in the basement looking at Alistair Overeem's pecs.
Were you eating horse meat?
I was actually eating hot dogs and petting my cats.
That's a very good call. Yeah, I totally agree with you. I feel like the part of UFC 151 that wasn't really examined close enough, this card would not have been canceled if Josh Koscheck hadn't have pulled out with a back injury. If you're going to blame anyone, blame Josh Koscheck. Which, obviously, I'm kidding, he backed out way before, but the reason UFC 151 was canceled wasn't solely because Jones versus Henderson was scrapped. We've had plenty of fights where the main event was scrapped. You can go, Edgar versus Maynard 3 was scrapped. We had so many fights this summer and last summer that were scrapped. But the co-main offered up a legitimate enough fight to where that card could headline an event. Unfortunately, Koscheck pulled out, and there wasn't really a top welterweight available to be matched up against Jake Ellenberger. If we had Martin Kampmann available, we could have done Kampmann-Ellenberger too. That probably would have been enough to headline UFC 151. But unfortunately, that didn't happen. We had Jay Heron brought over from Bellator, even though he has a great record. I think he's 12-1 in his last 13. Ellenberger-Heron isn't a big enough fight to headline a card, and because of that, because it wasn't the fact that the main event was canceled, it was the fact that the co-main event was so weak. That's why UFC 151 was really canceled, and UFC fans all over the world have been left scratching their heads and other parts of their bodies up until this next UFC.
Upper torso, femur, their feet.
Yep. UFC 152 is until September 22nd. Strikeforce Melendez versus Healy is until September 29th. So, and it's really, really kind of odd. We're having 3 podcasts in a row where we have no fights to either preview or break down. Usually we have a fight for both. We're previewing something and breaking down something, which we plan on doing starting on the 19th of September all the way through November. We have tons of cards, tons of UFC and Strikeforce cards. Just right now, it kind of worked out coincidentally to where September 1st was the one oasis in the dry desert of early September, late August cards. And it was the first card of 151 to get canceled. Kind of shitty.
I mean, as a fan, we were complaining a while ago about how it was oversaturation in the market. There were too many UFCs happening, back to back to back. And now, the first time in the company's history, there is not a UFC on a Saturday for a long time. And I can tell you personally, that's not a good feeling for me. I love MMA. It's my only sport. You're into, a litany of sports. You like hockey, you like basketball, you like football. So you always have something going on, whereas I really don't. It's just based on what the UFC is doing, their Strikeforce or Bellator, and it's been pretty fucking sad.
Wow, I'm looking now. It's actually a 6-week drought between UFC 152 and UFC 150, which they, it ended up not working out for the UFC. Usually the UFC will pen, like FX, Fuel, and Fox between pay-per-views, but this Labor Day stretch was a stretch where they didn't have anything other than 151 between 150 and 152. UFC 150 was August 11th. UFC 152 is September 22nd. That's 6 weeks that we don't have anything. And we went through the same thing, I think, back in June or July. And we were ready for it, though, at least. When the one fight ended, we're like, all right, wow, we got 6 weeks between now and the next fight. Fuck. But this one, we expected 3 weeks. Rather, we had UFC 150, wait 3 weeks, UFC 151, wait 3 weeks, UFC 152. But now we have UFC 152, Jones versus Belfort, which I don't think people are nearly as excited for as they are for Jones-Henderson. Kind of a letdown all around as far as the fight matchups and the timing of all these fights.
Hashtag Bones Knows.
Hashtag Bones Knows. I really think Vinny Magalese had the best tweets as far as the outcry against John Jones, saying, how to piss off all the fans and cancel an event. Hashtag Bones Knows. How to make Dana White angry as shit. Hashtag Bones Knows. That was that took the cake as far as the best anti-John Jones tweets out there.
Bada boom patish.
What a boom patish. But Dana White, like I mentioned before, saying Machida will fight again before the title. Who do you think makes sense as a fight for Lyoto Machida going forward?
The winner of Shogun Gustafsson.
I was going to say the winner of Sonnen Griffin.
He destroys both of those guys, so,
You really think Lyoto Machida destroys Chael Sonnen?
I'm going to go ahead and say pass. I'm going to pass, just in case we get him on.
I'm also going to pass, but Sonnen, or you know what? F that. Wait, why am I bleeping myself? Fuck that. I don't think Machida would beat Chael Sonnen. Lyoto Machida is a counter-striker. Lyoto Machida stays back and waits for people to attack. That is his MO. But he's also lost, 3 of his last 5? I don't have his thing up, which I'm going to bring up, which is excellent podcast when the person talking is Google.
I can go ahead and just...
Yeah, he's lost 3 of his last 5. Wins against Randy Couture and Ryan Bader, losses against John Jones, Quentin Jackson, and Mauricio Rua. I think if Chael Sonnen really exercises game plan, Chael Sonnen is not going to sit back and throw punches and kicks at you and be open for counter-strikes. Chael Sonnen is going to be less than an inch away from your face the entire fight. And I really don't think Lyoto Machida has the jiu-jitsu or wrestling to take care of that. Yes, he has good takedowns, but that's if Lyoto Machida is charging against a guy who really isn't moving much. Chael would dominate Lyoto Machida, I think. I really think if Chael Sonnen fought Lyoto Machida, it'd be 30-27 across the board. And that would be a brilliant matchup for people like John Jones, who are saying, oh, Chael needs a better test before he gets a title shot. I think Chael Sonnen is going to railroad Forrest Griffin, and I think if after that fight he got a chance against Lyoto Machida, I think he'd railroad Lyoto Machida. Do I think he'd railroad John Jones? No, but I want to see that fight, and I feel like that would be a sensible path for him to the light heavyweight championship.
I like your passion. I like the cut of your toe. But here's why I disagree. Here's why I disagree. Perfect example. You mentioned that he's 2-3 in his last 5. Well, guess what? He clearly, in my opinion, beat Quentin Rampage Jackson.
Agreed.
At when they called that fight. Quentin was like, "Oh my God, I won!" So let's do a litmus test and do some MMA math. As much as I hate to do it,
Math.
Bader dominated Rampage for 2 out of 3 rounds, and Machida 100% starched Bader. Bader had 0 offense from Machida.
That was such a dirty. Yeah, that was. I mean, if it had gone to a decision, that easily could have been a 30-26, 30-25 fight.
So here's the deal with Bader versus Machida. What that proves to me is that Machida can hang with any kind of power wrestling, and here's why. John Jones talked about all the 4 fighters that were fighting on that Fox card, and he said that Vera had the biggest mouth, Machida was the biggest puzzle,
yep.
Ryan Bader was the strongest. So he said Bader was the strongest guy he's faced, and Machida made him look like a fucking ragdoll. So how is a guy coming up from 185 to 205 and hasn't fought at that weight in 5 or 6 years going to do anything against Machida? I love Chael Sonnen. I love the way he fights. I think he's naturally suited for 185. I think at 205, he's going to be subpar. Yeah, he'll smash Forrest Griffin, but if he ever fought Machida, I think Machida would do worse to him than Anderson did in the second fight.
I don't think Bader really had a chance to show off his strength. Machida did a really good job at kind of lulling Bader into wanting to strike with him. Bader, his MO should have been trying to tie up with him, take him down, bring it to a wrestling standpoint. Bader let that fight become a stand-up fight, and that was one of the most questionable. I don't know why Bader did it, because Machida, you don't want to stand up with Machida. Even if you're John Jones, even if you're Anderson Silva, you don't want to stand with Lyoto Machida.
Well, I agree with that. There's no holes to your point, except for the fact that in that fight, there's 2 instances where they clinched up, and Bader started the clinch and looked real strong, and then cut to half a second later, Machida was stonewalling him, pushing him back, and Ryan Bader decided to back off and push off. So Bader had 2 separate times where he could have clinched up and shot a double or, tried to throw him, and he looked like he was the inferior, strength-wise.
I almost feel like, I don't know why, but Bader was almost going for trips more than he was going for a single or a double leg. Bader was almost trying to get Machida at his own game. Like really, I did not see a strong single leg or double leg takedown attempt from Ryan Bader. And if we had seen that, I think we probably would have seen a takedown. But for some reason, Bader was just playing the clinch game with him. I don't know why he just didn't shoot in head first for a takedown when Lyoto threw, but he was trying to get too technical against one of the most technical fighters in the UFC.
I agree. And the last point I want to make about Machida Bader is the fact that Bader didn't shoot those takedowns because Machida has a patented powered knee to the body. And that can also apply to countering a double leg. If you shoot in for a double leg, have you seen the knees that Machida landed on Tito, Rampage, Randy? Like, he has this
so could you.
knee, yeah, this giant knee where he starts off, he lets his leg relax, and then he brings it full pendulum swing into their body. That could easily catch someone on a double leg, and that's why I think Bader wasn't going for it.
Yeah, I could see that, but I almost feel like that was Bader's only chance to win the fight. You aren't going to trip a guy like Lyoto Machida, but I am very interested to see. Both of us agree that Chael Sonnen's going to railroad through Forrest Griffin, which isn't a thing against Forrest Griffin. Just it's literally one of the most motivated fights in the world versus what seems like one of the most unmotivated fights in the world. It's really true, and we should see Chael Sonnen versus Forrest Griffin at UFC 155 on December 29th. And if Henderson does indeed get a title shot against Jon Jones or Vitor Belfort, whoever wins the fight, most likely Jon Jones, and that should open up the schedules for both Sonnen and Machida. And we all know Sonnen's been calling out probably the main three people he's been calling: Machida, Vanderlei Silva, and Anderson Silva. I guess you probably can take Anderson Silva off the board after that Brazilian barbecue, put Jones up as the new number one. But, definitely be interesting to see Sonnen versus Machida.
See that match because Chael called him out. And, if it makes sense in the division, let's go.
And if Chael calls him out, Dana's going to make the fight.
I will fight Jose Aldo. I'll go down to 145. I'll go up to 6'5". I'll fight any man. I'll fight
Santos on the same ring. Bring them both on. And buy my book, VIP Voiceries. Chael, I actually sent him a tweet from the MMA podcast seeing if he would come on. Chael, if you're listening now, and if you're Chael or anybody else, call in 646-378-1046. We actually had a quick DM conversation. Chael said thank you for supporting the book, and I literally begged him to call in, so maybe a 1% chance he'll call in sometime. If he does, I'll probably poop my pants. But if you're listening live now, definitely give a call, and would love to hear your opinion on what we're talking about. And before we get to our segment, Fights We're Pumped About, I want to kind of finish up our UFC 151 fallout. Jon Jones saying he considered paying other fighters' salary until the insults started pouring in through Twitter. How much do you believe that, Chris?
I believe none of it. He's a snake. He's snake oil. I was going to pay for it, but no, I'm not, because they talk shit. How about there was nothing in the media about him going, okay, guys, I'm sorry, I'll pay for it, and then the backlash came. That's just an afterthought. I think that pissed me off a lot. I don't agree with that.
Yeah, it was seen by kind of disingenuous move. I don't think anyone really bought it. I don't think anyone bought the fact that he was saying he was going to pay a fighter's salary. Really, I mean, Jones really has kind of set himself up as the villain now. He actually even came out and said, "I'm not here to be loved. I'm here to fight." And he should have expected somewhat of a backlash after he turned down a fight. It wasn't an obvious choice to have a 205-pound title fight, but he was the only choice. And Dana White, mentioned it on his appearance yesterday on UFC Tonight that Lyoto Machida turned down the fight, John Hua turned down the fight, that Chael Sonnen was the only one who was